April 7th is known as National Beer Day, and while many of the national days of the year seem to be celebrated just for fun, this one is tied to some history.
That's right. The holiday commemorates the events of April 7th, 1933. At the time, pundits called it the most remarkable beer day in history. And here with us to talk about the history and beer's impact on the nation, we've got CMU economics professor and author Jason Taylor. Jason, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here.
We're glad to have you on Beer Day of all days.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yes.
Well, give us a brief history, because from the 1920s, then into the 30s, we went from prohibition to all of a sudden, let's celebrate beer in a real quick, short amount of time.
Yeah. But so Prohibition starts in January of 1920, and it lasts until December of 1933. But in what Prohibition did is it prohibited intoxicating liquors. So in March of 1933, President Roosevelt asked Congress to basically declare beer non-intoxicating so that it would be allowed even though we were under Prohibition. Congress gets to quick action, passes what they called the Beer Bill, legalizes beer, light alcohol beer. This is beer up to 4% alcohol by volume. Roosevelt signs the bill on March 22nd, and it says 15 days later, which is April 7th, 1933, that beer will become legal in the United States.
Was there, I'm just trying to imagine, knowing how Congress works today compared to 90 years ago, but was there this, on-floor debate about how much 4% versus 3% versus 5%? Yep. Were they all doing beer shots on the House floor to figure out what was too much?
They brought in medical experts who basically said, several of them who said, this beer, 4% beer, it's not possible for the human stomach to hold enough of this beer to become intoxicated. This is actually on the House of Congress. So they brought in medical experts saying these kinds of things. And then the reason why they wanted to legalize beer was this is the heart of the Great Depression. We have 25% unemployment. And the idea was that beer would bring back a lot of jobs, not just jobs for the brewers, but jobs for the makers of brewing equipment, bottlers. So a lot of the testimony was about that if we legalize beer, we can bring back happy days or be here again. We can bring back jobs and prosperity, and also tax revenue, because about a third of all government federal revenues before Prohibition were from alcohol taxes, believe it or not.
Interesting. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And April 6th was New Beer's Eve, so that was like the pre-celebrating day, or tell us a little pre-party planning.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So on April 6th. So the idea is that at 12 midnight as April 6th turns April 7th, that's when beer is going to become legal. So until that point, the beer had to stay in the breweries. So what happened is people spontaneously went to the nation's breweries. There were 30,000 people that gathered at the Anheuser-Busch brewery alone, and many of the smaller breweries would still have 1,000 or 2,000 people there, just counting down until midnight. And then at midnight there'd be whistles, gunshots in the air, fireworks in some cases, and then the beer trucks were allowed to actually leave the brewery finally. And there's all these people all around, so they often had police escorts getting crowd control, getting the crowd out of the way so that the trucks could leave. And then 10, 15, 20 minutes later, the beer starts to arrive at the actual hotels, restaurants, bars. And of course, people are gathered there as well. And then that party starts, and that goes on many states until 2 a.m., and then they had to shut down. And then it started up the next day, April 7th, the morning, around 10 a.m. or so, they could open back up. Yeah. And then all day, April 7th, it's like most every bar, hotel, restaurant is like, the counters are 4 to 8 people deep. Mm-hmm. People would hand their dimes up, and then they'd get their steins passed back filled with beer.
Wow.
This is April 7th, and this is why we commemorate now National Beer Day on this day, to commemorate those events.
How cool it would be to just be a fly on the wall or be there during that time just to see it versus now, how much things have changed.
I was just saying, it was great that no one got drunk that day.
Yeah.
Because, they had that 4% cutoff.
Well,
right?
it sounds humorous, but actually, many of the police stations, the police blotters said that this was the first evening in years that they didn't have a single person who was intoxicated in the drunk tank. And now, if you think about it, it's actually during Prohibition, most of the liquor in the speakeasies, but the things were hard liquor. They weren't serving beer in the speakeasies.
Right.
It was very strong alcohol, dangerous alcohol actually, because a lot of it was made in questionable conditions. So they would this night they had nobody. Many Lansing, for example, on the night of our New Beer's Eve, had nobody intoxicated. And so they said that, hey, maybe Congress was right to declare beer non-intoxicating as a result.
That's interesting. And you also wrote this book, The Brew Deal. Tell us a little bit about your book and just what got you so interested and passionate about this topic.
Right. Well, so I'm an economic historian who studies the Great Depression. And again, the reason why beer was legalized was to try to help battle the Great Depression. That's the title of my book, The Brew Deal, How Beer Helped Battle the Great Depression. The idea that it would create all these jobs. And it worked. It worked fantastically well. The economy had been in a 3.5-year free fall. And then between April and July of 1933, there's this huge turnaround in the economy. Now, it's not all because of beer, but beer plays, as I argue in the book, a significant role in this. Manufacturing output rises 78% in just 4 months. The stock market rises over 70% in just 4 months. And we see lots of jobs being created.
Wow.
And a lot of this is directly tied to beer, where again you get jobs in the making of glass bottles and the making of refrigeration equipment. But I think the more important factor was actually psychological. That when people were able to see in the nation's headlines, they saw pictures. I have a lot of good pictures in the book, by the way, of the New Beer's Eve parties.
Oh, cool.
When they saw pictures in the headlines of people just smiling for the first time in 3.5 years and toasting to the goodness of life, and they saw these headlines about how beer creates jobs, beer and prosperity, it had a psychological impact on the nation's consumers and businesses to start hiring again, start spending again, and I think it had a major role in the turnaround in turning the corner from the Great Depression in 1933.
That's great. Well, Jason Taylor with us from CMU. The book is The Brew Deal. Check with your local bookstore or on Amazon and pick up a copy.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Wherever
for coming
books are
in.
sold. Yeah,
So
thank you so much for
interesting.
having me.
Happy
Thanks for sharing
National
that.
Beer Day to you.
Yeah, happy Beer Day.